another informative time with me on Armagate Radio Communications. The theme is Geopolitical Musings for Global Leaders, and I'm your anchor, Abiona Barry. Thanks for clicking in. It's important for you to know that despite the vicissitudes, the geopolitical economy, we at Armagate are always ready to guide and support you to achieve your organizational ends, providing you with actionable insights and advisory to ensure that spring in your step as you traverse the uncertain course of cross-border engagements. And yes, the 50% tariffs on Indian goods to deter India from buying Russian energy and weapons kicks in today. The tariffs kick in today, and a scenario like that, this kind of scenario would be unfathomable a few months ago. Talk about the relationship between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. Okay, and this 50% tariff is more or less like a sanction on trade, because how do you want to compete with 50% tariffs? It means you are not welcome. So obviously India has to start looking inwards, has to start looking at alternatives, and bear in mind that the Indian Prime Minister is planning to visit China very, very soon, and of course this should be seen as a response to the 50% tariffs. Okay, despite the fact that there's no love lost between India and China. I recall the confrontation they had about 5 years ago, right, at the border. Okay, despite that, you have India sort of trying to stoop to conquer, that to be able to weather the storm that the 50% tariffs on Indian goods, that Trump has imposed to deter India from patronizing Russian energy, patronizing Russian weapons, trying to defund Russia in terms of war funding, okay, and so that President Trump can achieve his peace objectives in Ukraine. And recall that India has actually called out the hypocrisy, okay, that even the EU and America, US, still patronize Russia. So even China buys more Russian energy. So why is China not being sanctioned? All right, and have I explained that is because of the cards, the geopolitical cards that China holds. Of course, in terms of the rare earths, China is the dominant leader, is the leader in terms of rare earths, in terms of mining and refining of rare earths. Okay, and so the United States still depends on China for that a lot, and it's going to take quite some strategic efforts to win off China's rare earth. Okay, so based on that and other geopolitical factors too, Mr. Trump will not be able to wield the same card, use the same stick on China. Okay, and India has said no plans of stopping in terms of buying Russian energy. Okay, Modi has called the tariffs unfair. All right, and he has asserting that it's the best oil deal that will be chosen for India's 1.4 billion people. Okay, India is the world's 5th largest economy, right, and the 3rd largest in Asia. All right, and the United States is its largest export market, of course, until recently. All right, so and recall that earlier this month, Prime Minister Modi announced plans to cut taxes to mitigate the effects of the tariffs. Okay, on export-driven industries, from garments, clothes, to seafood and diamonds. All right, India exports a lot of diamonds to the United States. All right, so Prime Minister Modi has a response, has enjoyed Indians to put up made in India signs, okay, outside their stores, called Swadeshi and Hindu, okay, made in India, sort of trying to promote a Make in India, Buy India campaign, to try to mitigate the effects of the tariffs. And he has emphasized the need to be self-reliant, but not just out of desperation, not out of desperation as a result of the tariffs imposed, but out of a sense of national pride, a sense of national pride, making India, spending India, buy India. Okay, so with the rise of nationalism, around the world, countries are becoming more selfish economically. And Modi has said, and I quote him now, we mustn't sit and cry about our difficulties. We must rise above and not allow others to hold us in their clutches. End of quote. So, and this is a message that he reiterated at every public outing this week. Twice was outside and reiterated the message of Swadeshi, making India, and spend in India, buy India. All right. But actually, talking about making in India, look at manufacturing in India at the moment. It's had its own challenges, stagnating at 15% of GDP. Okay, despite government intervention with subsidies and other manufacturing incentives. Okay, and earlier in the budget this year, about $12 billion worth of income tax cuts were actually announced in the budget. Okay, and we also have a reduction in the simplification, and the simplification of the goods and services tax, sort of a consumption tax, is actually underway. Okay, in addition to the $12 billion income tax cuts announced in the budget. So you also have a GST tax cuts, a consumption tax cuts, goods and services tax cuts underway. Okay, which of course is a reaction to mitigate Trump's tariffs, which are kicking today. And critics of the GST have highlighted its complexity. Okay, hitherto, because it has many thresholds and many exemptions. So the need to revamp the GST has always been there. So I think that this tariffs kicking in now, that tonic needed to actually spur the government into action. So as a response, the India Finance Ministry has proposed a simplified two-tier system. Okay, so the reformed GST we gave about $20 billion US dollars in cuts, and coupled with the the cuts in income tax. All right, so and I think our consumption should be impacted because there will be creation of more disposable income available to the citizens to boost consumption and impact GDP. And importantly, we should note that private consumption is about 60% of India's economy. All right, and we also have a sustained spending in rural areas, which has actually led to great harvest, bumper harvest. Okay, but that has not been actually matched with urban demand for goods and services, which has actually been slowing because of lower wages, job cuts post-pandemic. So we find that the tax stimulus, that's something that is will actually incentivize consumption. Okay, and Morgan Stanley has said that the tax stimulus, and I quote, is particularly crucial, and headwinds from ongoing global geopolitical tensions and adverse global tariff-related developments that might impair external demand. End of quote. So talk about replacing external demand with increased local consumption. That's Indians should trade among themselves the more. Okay, 1.4 billion people, great markets, and if Indians can trade among themselves, that they'll be able to actually account and replace that shortfall that they will be missing out as a result of the tariffs imposed by President Trump. 50% tariffs on Indian goods, which will not make Indian goods competitive. People, of course, consumers will seek alternative, all right, in the US market. So the tax cuts, proposed tax cuts, are expected to impact sectors that produce garments, cars, and even cement. All right, and there are also concerns about how India will finance these cuts, of course. Okay, because it will have an impact on the budgets. Okay, but people are already looking at the excess of tax collection and the excess of the budgeted dividends of India's central bank should be able to finance the costs. Okay, so and I believe that the GST cost, the goods and services tax cost, will actually have a bigger domino effects than the earlier corporate and income tax cuts announced in the budget, since these cuts will actually address consumption directly at the point of exchange, okay, actually impacting consumer spending. All right, so and you reckon that India's central bank has actually cut rates about 1% in the last few months, and likely cut rates further to boost the lending and impact productivity. Okay, something to stimulate the economy. All right. And with the 5 million civil servants that India has and over 6.7 million pensioners, okay, so the increase in salaries and pensions, which will reflect next year, will also help sustain the momentum of India's growth, although it might not match the levels of the 8% levels that of a few years ago. Okay, and of course, all these plans announced by the Indian government have actually given the boost to the Indian stock market. All right, moving upwards. So, and with the sovereign rating upgrade, the sovereign rating is actually a measure of the risk of lending to a government or the risk of investing in the country. All right, so India has a sovereign rating upgrade from S&P Global after a lacuna of 18 years. All right, so and this will actually help lower significantly government borrowing costs and also improve the flow of foreign direct investments. So India is trying to respond to the tariffs, and like I said, the Indian scenario came to many as a surprise, because Prime Minister Modi and President Trump get along quite well, and the Indian leader has even visited the White House this year. Okay, and he was received with much enthusiasm. Okay, and Trump intervened also in the Pakistan-Indian skirmish, wielding the trade card. Okay, and the two countries actually, stopped the fighting. Okay, so but because Trump is keen on bringing peace to Ukraine, and that's why he's actually pushing the envelope and when it comes to India, just to ensure that Russia is defunded as it concerns the Ukraine war. Okay, but Prime Minister Modi is defiant. Okay, and even with Trump's leaning towards Pakistan, India's sworn enemy. All right, so the argument about the weaponization of trade is also valid when it comes to India, that Trump is weaponizing trade to achieve geopolitical ends. All right, and India has not ceased to call out that hypocrisy. That the United States still imports uranium hexafluoride for its nuclear industry from Russia, and also palladium for its electric vehicle industry, also fertilizers and chemicals from Russia. Okay, and also Russia-EU trade in 2024 was quite significant. You have EU imports of Russian LNG are significant. All right, EU reporting fertilizers, mining products, chemicals, iron and steel from Russia. That is not just India funding Russia in the Ukraine war, but also United States and European Union. So, and that has made India defiant in the face of the glaring hypocrisy. So, and of course, the implication of the weaponization of trade, of imposing tariffs, sorts of trade sanctions, that okay, you are not welcome to trade here, because that's the implication of 50% tariffs. The implication is that countries will strategically pivot away from the United States and look for replacement trading partners, okay, like and renew and realign their trade and foreign policies. Like, okay, India wants to do with China now, okay, and also looking inwards because it also has the market. All right, so nations will ultimately reach out, react if the situation of weaponization persists. Okay, and that is what you have India doing. Yeah, and at this point, we'll take a break, and when we come back, it's still Geopolitical Musings for global leaders. Please stay with us.
Gate, founded in 2008 out of a desire to build transgenerational structures for organizations, institutions, and nations. We have worked with large businesses, international development organizations, and public sector ministries and agencies. Gate, our uniqueness is that we do not just work for you, we work with you. For example, we do not leave you to the task after sourcing talent that will help the new hire settle into robust leadership development programs. We are technical experts in advancing and supporting institutions in strategy and leadership, artificial intelligence, strategic human resource management, public sector reform, finance, audit and tax, FAT, and strategic communications. We do all this and more out of a desire to transform nations through institutions and organizations. For further inquiries, email contact at thearmygate.org or phone +234 810 999 6666 +234 807 957 4151 and +161 0504 6026 www.thearmygate.org. Armygate, building to endure and transforming nations through institutions and organizations.
Welcome back. It's still Geopolitical Musings for global leaders, and I'm your anchor, Abiodun Apari. Yes, Brazilian state-owned Petrobras set to resume operations in Nigeria 5 years after exit. President Tinubu on a state visit to Brazil, signing 5 memorandum of understandings, 5 MOUs to foster trade, diplomacy, science, aviation, and finance ties. Okay, meeting with President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva of Brazil, who's also in a running battle, geopolitical battle with President Trump, and Trump has also imposed tariffs on Brazil, okay, as a result of the prosecution of former President Bolsonaro. And even today, Bolsonaro was placed under actually placed under house arrest because I think information was brought to the judge that it was a flight risk. Okay, and that is what Trump is actually against. Trump is saying that the prosecution of former President Bolsonaro is politically motivated, that President Lula is actually weaponizing the judiciary against his predecessor, in the allegation of coup plotting. All right, so And because of that, like we predicted that Brazil will start looking for replacement for the US markets, and it's not surprising that the largest black market in the world, the largest African market in the world, the leader of the largest black nation, is esteemed guest. Okay, so and of course there are plans for Embraer, the Brazilian aircraft manufacturer, to establish a regional service hub to support Nigeria's growing aviation industry. We also had the aviation minister of Nigeria, Festus Keyamo, signing bilateral agreements with his Brazilian counterpart, transport leader, transport head, okay, in Brazil, transport minister. And Tinubu has actually hammered on the need to move from symbolic ties to concrete economic cooperation. Of course, he needs to actually emphasize on that, bearing in mind the kind of pressure he has locally, the kind of pressure he has back home. The need to deliver economic dividends to the people. The need for people to feel the effects of the reforms positively in their personal economies. In a lot of grumbling that these reforms have not been felt positively by the people. All right, that people have been facing high inflation, high cost of goods, and we have high cost of energy. All right, and the subsidy removal has not actually been the effect of subsidy removal has not been mitigated by the policies of government. And you reckon that this is his third visit to Brazil. He was there during the G20, he was there during the BRICS summit, and this third visit is actually a state visit. So President Tinubu also talked about technology transfer, about energy, and also the economy, the need for investment and knowledge exchange in the health and pharmaceuticals, in healthcare and pharmaceuticals. Okay, and he actually admitted Brazil's technological superiority and the need for Nigeria to actually gain such knowledge through technological and knowledge exchange. Right, and he actually did well in selling Nigeria in terms of his reforms. That his reforms is yielding fruits back home, and he also emphasized, the fluidity, okay, of capital repatriation. That capital repatriation won't be a problem, and the forex regime is now stable. We have forex stability, so that investors from Brazil can have the right confidence to invest in the Nigerian economy. Yeah, but I believe that there should be a focus on value addition in agriculture and the agro-allied sector, okay, because that will really move the needle and impact citizens and reduce the political pressure is facing back home, okay. And despite the comments of the Director General of the World Trade Organization, WTO, Dr. Okonjo-Iweala's comments about Tinubu's reforms achieving stability of Nigerian economy, people have not been, commentators have not been impressed, and people have even said that the economy might be stabilizing, but the stability status is at the moment far-fetched. I'm talking about the agriculture and agro-allied sector. Brazil is really doing well because, especially in terms of the innovation in animal husbandry and also in biofuel. Okay, and in Nigeria we are actually blessed with cassava, and you reckon that cassava peels have high level of carbohydrates, which can be excellent raw material for producing biogas, for household cooking and electricity generation across Africa, not just in Nigeria, okay, and also produce bioethanol for fueling vehicles and providing cheap energy, and reducing reliance on refined oil. Okay, because with cheap energy, inflation will be controlled, inflation will be tamed. All right, and you also have renewable pellets for industrial heating. So even the global bioenergy industry is about $500 billion, and you understand that Nigeria has that advantage in terms of cassava production. We just need government's political will to ensure value addition in that industry, and it will impact the numbers. It will actually provide employment for the masses of our people. It will move the needle and to reduce the political tension for Mr. President. And talking about green energy from cassava peels, the benefits, is its environmental impact, reduce the reduction in greenhouse emissions by converting waste into fuel, is it the cheap and accessible energy, providing affordable energy to households across Africa, okay, or is it the export earnings, because there is increase in demand for biofuels, the world is moving away from carbonated fuel, and there is increasing demand. So we'll talk about export earnings, or employment creation, and also impacting innovation in renewable energy. Creating employment for the masses of our youth, the masses of the people of Nigeria, and that will really impact GDP numbers, GDP per capita, and very, very importantly, and prosperity and sustainable development can be entrenched and engendered in an atmosphere of peace and cooperation across the African continent. And Nigeria should implement ambitious military and international relations strategies to defeat terrorism and organized violence across the continent, because South Africa might be standing aloof, more concerned about its image and standing in the global south, and not so concerned about the issues across Africa, in Congo, in Mali, and so on. So, but Malema came to Nigeria, all right, and I'm shake across, okay, and maybe that's a sign of a shift, okay, but Malema is not in executive leadership at the moment, okay, but it's a good sign, because I believe South Africa too should be more involved. All right. So, but apart from that, Nigeria itself still needs to tinker its educational curriculum towards providing the necessary technical core manpower, that will deliver the industrial, manufacturing, and technological revolution. Not just, admitting the fact that Brazil is technologically superior, but churn out policies that will ensure that the natural energy resources are exploited, with the intention of creating wealth to provide sufficient military and civilian infrastructure, as well as cheap energy. Because Nigeria is positioned to well supply about 60% of the industrial, manufacturing, and technological needs across the continent, with the policy optimization of its abundant human and natural and energy resources, adequate investment in logistics and infrastructure across the continent, ambitious, sustainable manufacturing and technological internal subsidies, all right, and of course the African Union passport too will also impact, these policies. So, and the policy of visa on entry, across Africa for holders of the African Union passports. Also talking about the potency of the African Continental Free Trade Area. All right. So so I believe that all these factors very, very important, and with having a populist nationalist in the White House of the United States. Okay, so Nigeria can really move the ball and achieve a massive rollback of terrorism and organized violence, in Nigeria and across the continent, because you have the Trump administration readopting the policy of striking high-profile terror targets, high-profile terrorists across the world. Okay, so Nigeria can take advantage of that. And just recently, I think the U.S. government approved more arms sales to Nigeria. So because without security, the masses of the people of Nigeria will not be able to go to the farm. And with that, we've come to the end of today's episode. I hope the time we've spent together has been impactful, and I look forward to you joining me again next week. Until I come up on your devices again, keep learning, keep improving, and keep impacting. Bye-bye, and God bless. Thank you.